Hello and welcome to Collie Conversations, the podcast that's all about transforming your life with your Border Collie. I'm Gemma Fisher, your expert in all things collie. Whether you're dealing with reactivity, recall struggles, or just looking to understand your collie better, you've come to the right place. I'm here to help you turn those frustrating behaviours into wins with practical advice and real life solutions. If you haven't already, head over to our Facebook group to get your collie questions answered in my weekly live Q&A session. Plus, the group also has training guides, my recommended resources from the podcast, and lots of other extra support and tips for collie owners just like you. Today, we'll be discussing how to make sure our collies' need for rest and relaxation is met to help them be their best selves. So grab a cup of tea and get ready to take some notes. Let's get started. So I'm going to start by talking about the general importance of rest and why particularly it's so important for Border Collies, potentially compared to other dog breeds, to get enough rest. Now, quite simply, if you think about Border Collies, they're the workaholics of the dog world, aren't they? They live to work. And, I know lots of dogs that would work until they dropped. They don't necessarily have self-preservation in their genetics. And the thing is, from a behavior perspective, is that burnout for them looks like lots of the undesirable behaviors that people contact me about. So if they are not getting enough rest, then they will, start to get quite edgy and start to behave in ways that don't always fit with general family life. So it's worth thinking about the question, how does rest help improve a Border Collie's ability to focus during training? So same as you or I, when you get enough sleep, you can process new information better. Because while you're asleep, your brain is sifting through the day's information, deciding what is and what isn't important. And the same thing is happening to our dogs. And what happens to a Border Collie when they don't get enough rest or downtime? Studies have shown that your ability to learn new things could drop by up to 40% if you're not getting enough sleep. All right. Now, our physiology is not that much different to our dogs. So really, that statistic is quite important because there's no reason to think that our dogs are any different. And more than that, we know that we're not our best selves without sleep. So, to expect our dogs to be better with no sleep seems a bit strange, doesn't it? Now, there's been relatively little research into the symptoms of sleep deprivation in dogs. As you can imagine, it's maybe not such a hot topic as it is in humans. But anecdotal evidence suggests that they might mimic some of the symptoms of poor sleep that us humans get, which can include things like more intense reactions to stressful stimuli. So, that person walking past that looks a bit funny, panic stations, that really makes me worry on a particular day, being irritable, sort of mood disturbances in terms of like normally they'd be okay with something, but then for whatever reason that day, they just cannot cope. And importantly, poor memory. So there was a small study done that looked at sleep and its impact on a dog's ability to learn. And what they found was quite significant. So in one study, dogs who slept well after learning a new command performed better when tested a week later than dogs who did not. All right. So I'll just say that once more because I think that's important. So in one study, dogs who slept well after learning a new command performed better when tested a week later than dogs who did not. So you might be training, and you might be thinking, Gemma, I'm doing everything I can, and they're just not getting it. Possibly the problem is not your lesson plan, but maybe it's more in the fact that your dog is not getting adequate rest to be able to absorb and process the information. So can too much activity or stimulation lead to problem behaviors in Border Collies? Short answer is yes. If our dogs are constantly high on adrenaline, they are going to struggle to relax and get good quality sleep. If you think about what your doctor might say to you if you went to them and said, doctor, I'm really struggling to get off to sleep. And then when I do sleep, I'm a light sleeper. I'm awake during the night. They would say things like, avoid caffeine before bedtime. Not such a dog problem, but adrenaline is going to be producing similar things in the dog system. And thinking about ways to just be a bit more meditative and chill out a little bit in order to get that good rest. So if they're constantly high on adrenaline, they're just not going to be in a position to find it easy to relax. So how does sufficient rest impact a Border Collie's mental health and overall well-being? Well, good quality rest and relaxation is vital, in my opinion, for our collies' mental health and their overall well-being, as it impacts so many other things. Now, one of the important things I think as collie owners is for our ability to be able to recognize overstimulation. And knowing the signs that a Border Collie is overstimulated and needs rest is important, because we need to address that if it's not happening. So good indicators are a dog that maybe struggles to stay still. They want to follow you around all the time. They're what I call hypervigilant to noises in the home or outside. So if somebody's moving around upstairs, they can't settle because they're like, oh, what's going on? If you're doing things like doing the washing up, putting dishwashers on, maybe cleaning, using the vacuum, that sort of stuff is just, it grates on their nerves. They cannot cope. And people walking past the house, or, somebody walking their dog outside the house, those sorts of things, just everything triggers them. And if you have children at all, then you might recognize this, but essentially they're like a toddler who needs a nap. But in the history of toddlers, no child that has ever come to their parents and gone, do you know what, mummy, I feel a bit grumpy, I think maybe I need a nap. In my personal experience, yes, children do not do that. So it's worth bearing that in mind from our Border Collie's point of view. They're not going to come to you and say, do you know what, I feel like I need to, I need some downtime. It just doesn't happen. Now, what common activities unintentionally overstimulate a Border Collie? Well, exercise. All right. Too much mindless running around, taking out a tennis ball or taking a football out and kicking that around. Mindless running around like that, where the dog is not having to use their brain. They're literally, it is exercise of sort. They are, running, but there's not any thought to it. So it's all about just run, 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 run. That is doing that problem of raising adrenaline in the system, to the point where when you bring the dog home, sometimes you would think that they would be tired because you've made them run and run and run. But I know some dogs really, really struggle to then settle down even after that, and that's because they're running high on adrenaline now. So that's the thing that we look to fix. Now, equally, as much as I say exercise and that sort of running around can overstimulate a Border Collie, so too can too little exercise. And this one's a difficult one because for me personally, my dogs probably get about an hour and a half, but they're running around with each other. So they are going to be getting, say, more exercise than a dog that's taken out by themselves. I've worked with people who have had a Border Collie puppy and they've, read what it said on the tin, as it were, and thought, you know what, I need to take this dog out, 3-4 times a day, and they need to go out for long. Too much of that, as I say, can be a bad thing. I think it's all about trying things out and trying to work out from your dog's perspective, what is the optimum amount for exercise. And bearing in mind, one of the things that walks can do is, if there are lots of things that trigger the dog when they go out walking, that can easily lead to overstimulation. All right. So if you are going for a lead walk and it involves going past cars or bumping into cats or maybe scary people that have got hoodies up or other dogs, walks like that, it might be better to think, actually, I need to reduce those types of walk, because going out and doing those is an issue as well. So it's all about trying to work out what the right amount of exercise for your dog is, and thinking about the type of exercise. Those two things are really important. So the question is, how can overstimulation contribute to the undesirable behaviors that I talked about earlier? So things like barking, reactivity, destructive chewing, that kind of thing. Well, essentially, it's that lack of rest leads to that hypervigilance and the inability to be able to switch off. All right. So that's sort of the main thing. So providing effective relaxation is really helpful for lots of the difficult behaviors that you might be seeing out and about with your collie. So when people come to me, they often, they're coming to me with a problem like, let's say your dog is reactive to other dogs. you're very focused on that is the problem. But actually, when I start to ask questions and think of it a bit like peeling back the layers of an onion, what we sometimes start to find is the dog is not resting very well at home. And therefore, when they step out the front door, they're already on high alert because they've been practicing it at home. So then it makes sense that the first dog that they see is going to cause them to go up like a volcano. So something very important to bear in mind. If you're having issues out and about, let's look back to indoors and see whether or not there's anything there that we can work on. So, what are the best ways to help a Border Collie relax and unwind? Well, first and foremost, reducing their options is a good one. All right. So rather than letting them roam through the whole house, limiting them to one room for rest can be really, really helpful. If you think about Border Collies on farms, when the farmer returns, for the end of the workday, the dog is likely to be put into a kennel or a stable. All right. And that's where they're going to be. And the idea is there that they're going to switch off, that they're going to go and get their rest because they're needed for work the next day. So giving them the whole house and the option to look at that window or go and, get up on a bed upstairs or, watch people moving around outside, those things mean that they cannot switch off. So being able to limit them to one room can be really helpful. Now, if you can do that, one of the things that I will sometimes do with my dogs when we get home is that they've had a lovely walk, but then I'll produce a chew. All right, I'll some nice dog chew or other, because chewing releases endorphins, which will help them calm down after a nice walk, and it will just add to those sort of feelings of contentment and relaxation that I'm looking to provide them with. Now, I have been asked the question in the past, can rest be active, such as sort of quiet brain games, or does it need to be complete inactivity? I mean, are we looking for the dog to be out stone cold throughout the day? It's a really good question. I think that rest can be active in certain cases. So replacing, say, those triggering walks that maybe your dog struggles with in terms of, that lead walk around the block, which seems like a good idea because it's exercise, and surely exercise should help with tiring the dog out. But actually, if we replace sort of a triggering walk with quiet brain games, it can be a really good option for active rest, because what we're doing is we're replacing some of that exercise requirement with, as I say, quiet brain game. And you can think of that as sort of an active rest. Now, scent work is a really big favourite for this. I really like scent work, and my dogs and I have a lot of fun playing with this. I'm not sure that we do it in any sort of official standard way, but it doesn't need to be official. It just needs to be a conversation between you and your dog where you're both having fun. One thing I would say, because we're talking about Border Collies, is just make sure that you don't end up with obsessive behaviours from it, though. So have a clear start and a finish protocol, because if you don't, what you can start to get is a dog that will then sort of push you to go, I want to do this, and ideally, as I say, we should have a clear start and finish, so that the dog is very clear. I'm working, and now I'm not working, and I can go and do my relaxing. Now, I know not everybody likes the idea of crate training, and it can be a little bit controversial, but crate training and teaching a dog to settle can really help contribute to their rest. Now, crate training helps because it reduces their options, such as I've mentioned earlier. You could, if you didn't want to use a crate, you could use something like puppy pen. In these days where we have more and more homes have kind of open plan living, it can be really difficult to provide the dog with a smaller space. So something like a pen area can be really good. As I say, not all dogs will like crates. Some dogs will love crates, and that's great. Whatever sort of suits your household best, I think, is the way forward. But it's all about creating clear physical boundaries. And they're really helpful for our collies because they really like nice, crisp, black and white rules. So yeah, that's something definitely worth looking into. Now, teaching a settle, I think, is one of my essential puppy skills, actually, when I first get a puppy, because it gives them a really clear direction. All right. I like to think of it as saying to my dog, your superpowers aren't needed for a while. All right. So you can just go and switch off because, you're off duty, as it were. All right. Because if they're always on, it's really, really difficult for them to be able to maintain some of those wonderful characteristics that they have, and be, as I say, be their best selves. Now, I really think calming routines can play a good role in helping Border Collies relax at home. So, I've raised children, and what you'll often do with a child is you'll have like a bedtime routine, and a routine which starts to trigger that relaxation towards bedtime. It's still a favorite now. The Johnson's lavender bubble baby bath. It takes me right back. Now, from our dog's perspective, scents like Adaptil or Pet Remedy sprayed onto blankets prior to settle time can be really helpful. One thing to bear in mind is you have to spray it 20 minutes earlier than you need. So my suggestion would be that if you want to try using it, I would spray it before I took the dog out for a walk. And then when they came back from a walk, it would be, ready for them to settle in. Using a radio or an Alexa to help play music or white brown noise can be really helpful, because what that does is it means that the dog can't listen out for sounds out and about. It kind of acts a bit like a foil to noises out and about, so it really can help them relax and settle down. Now, in the evening, the use of herbal supplements like chamomile in their bedtime meal or in bedtime biscuits, which is a really good recipe from my friend Holly Barker, which I'll share in the Facebook group. This can all lead to promoting a feeling of calm and relaxation. So yeah, really big fan of those. And some of my students have had some really good success with some of Holly's suggestions there. Now, one word of caution on this, because while routines are a really useful thing, do be careful not to become too prescriptive in your routine. So don't sort of set a timer so it's always at 6 o'clock every day, because as collies can get very upset if things don't happen as they are expecting. So we want to allow a little bit of movement so that if it's the weekend and the routine is put out, or if we've just had sort of Christmas and New Year, if you've got family staying and if things are out of kilter, we don't want our Border Collie to sort of panic and start worrying that, things are not happening as they should. All right. So just leave a little bit of flex in there. Now, for me, to get the best out of a Border Collie, it's about balancing work and rest. All right. So the question I often get asked is, how do I balance a Border Collie's natural drive for activity with that need for rest as well? Now, activity is a really great word here, because exercise, because it isn't just exercise in the form of running. All right. Activity is about mind and body. And, if for any of you that have ever done a good training session, maybe you've been out to a puppy class or a dog training class, it can be really tiring for a collie. All right. And they haven't done lots of racing around, but if they've had to think, if they've had to problem solve, if they've had to work things out, that can be a really good way to relax them and tire them out in a positive way. All right. So activity is different from, as I say, lots of mindless running around. Now, the other question I get asked a lot is, how much downtime or rest should a Border Collie ideally get in a day? Now, guidance varies so much on this, but somewhere between 8 and 14 hours is quite a good guide. And of course, that's over the course of a 24-hour period. But, and this is a big but, it doesn't mean they have to be running around for the remaining 16 hours. All right. For me, it should be a balance of kind of mooching around, being around the house, going out in the garden. Some training time, I think, is really helpful. And that's helpful for, mentally wearing them out. And obviously some of their exercise in there as well. Now, I know that some owners can feel a bit guilty when they're asking these, Border Collies to rest, particularly if they're the sort that are like, play with me, and they're busy. Now, what I would say to you is, would you expect a toddler to know what was best for them? I think most of us would say we probably wouldn't let them set the rules for the household, because that might not be a good idea. Now, as owners, we're in that parental responsibility position. And knowing what we know, that a happy collie needs rest as well as exercise, it's up to us to say, no, do you know what? At this point, I need you to go and switch off and go and settle down. And you'd be really surprised. I think for some Border Collies, it comes as a bit of a relief to be told, no, go and settle down, go and chill out. Because being on all the time actually can be, almost a bit stressful, really. And the thing about it is it's all about the right balance, and your border collie is an individual, your family life is individual to, you know, your relationship with your border collie. It's all about trying to you know, play about with things and work out what works best for you as a family. Now, if you are trying to integrate rest into your family routine, this is something that can be a bit of an issue for some families. That, you know, it's busy, it's noisy, there's lots of stuff happening. Multi-dog households can be similar. I think it's a really good idea to think about having quieter spaces within the home. So if you have quite a busy home, then thinking about spaces in hallways, utility rooms, if you have a spare room, places where either you can put the dog or the dog can go, to be able to go, all right. You might even need that place, I don't know, but somewhere that you can go and relax, and the dog can go and switch off. That can be really, really helpful to them. And this is partly the reason this is really useful is because my friend Justin Sherman, who's a creator of the Dial Method for families. So if you have a border collie and you have a family, I highly recommend checking out her Dial Method. But one of the things that when I chatted to her was, we discussed how often when families have visitors over, what happens is the dog gets put away, but the dog only gets put away behind a baby gate, behind a door, when people arrive. So the dog is not practiced in relaxing and chilling out in that room, because it only happens, you know, once in a blue moon. So she suggests that you practice this when guests aren't around, so it's not a shock when they are. So if for example, you know, you're all there in the evening, that, you know, you just have maybe 15 minutes of saying to your dog, I'm going to go and pop you out there, you're going to go and relax by yourself, as I say, so that when you have visitors, it's not such a big shock to them. Now, one question I get asked is, how does ensuring my border collie is well rested make them, you know, how does it make them a better family member? Does it? Well, personally speaking, I think just like us, we're more likely to be the best version of ourselves when we're well rested. All right. So getting that balance between periods of activity and movement, which is an important part of being a border collie, with periods of downtime and rest and relaxation, that's going to bring out the best in your collie, which means that as part of your family, they're really going to be able to be an enjoyable part of your household. So how can new owners teach their border collie the value of calm and relaxation? Because it doesn't necessarily come easily to them, does it? First things first, I would say lots of collies learn that being busy gets them attention. You know, maybe they pick something up, they run off with it, somebody chases me. Maybe it's negative attention in terms of some, you know, I'm running around and people are like, no, stop. You know, they make a bit of a fuss because the dog is doing something they shouldn't be. So try to make sure that it isn't just being busy that gets your attention. All right. Try noticing when they're calm and chilled out and responding with the sort of similar energy that you want from them, sort of calm and relaxed, with some quiet praise and some affection. So sometimes I'll just wander past my dogs if they're on their bed. I might give them just a brief stroke on the head, or I might just say to them, that's super, what a good dog. That's really lovely. And you see it just, the tone comes down and it's quieter. And that's the sort of praise and energy that you're looking to impart in those situations. Now, in terms of sort of real life situations, I wanted to share a success story that one of my students, Karen and Bob, had. Now she's a member of my online membership, Collie Culture Club, but she and I did a one-to-one before Christmas, I think. And one of the biggest problems that Karen has had is that she has not been able to have some family members, her sons, come over with their families, because Bob really, really struggles with visitors, which is obviously a huge problem for Karen and her husband. And it was something that I was really keen that we should address, because it doesn't feel right that much as we want to meet our dog's needs, you know, one of Karen's needs is her need to see her grandchildren and her children. So let me just read you a little bit of what the experience she had over Christmas, because I was really, really chuffed with this. So she explains, Bob reacts with barking and snarling at anyone who visits our house. My son, with his two very small people and wife, wanted to come on Boxing Day. Their last visit wasn't a huge success for Bob. He was in the hall, out of the way, but with a half glass door, he was very stressed, spying people moving around. So this time I put his crate, his favourite toys, a comfort blanket with a few treats to find in it, in an upstairs bedroom with the door shut. Yes, he did bark on their arrival, but then he settled. Yes, he did bark when the 1-year-old toddler cried when he fell over, as 1-year-old toddlers do. Yes, he barked when we had to retrieve the outdoor wear for a post-lunch walk, which had been put out of the way. Didn't take Bob with us, as the 3-year-old was going to be on his bike. But overall, she says, keeping him calmer by giving him things he's used to, ensuring he feels safe, enabled me to have my family visit and everyone have an enjoyable few hours. All right. So that story is a really, really good example of some of the things that I've talked about in today's podcast. It's for me, that rest and relaxation isn't just a nice to have. It's a really important piece of the puzzle of living with a Border Collie. All right. Now, I'm often asked, what's the one key misconception owners have about rest and relaxation for Border Collies? And the really key one is that it isn't possible. I argue that so strenuously. It's just absolutely not true. I have 4 Border Collies and they are all capable of, resting and relaxing around my home. I think it's really important that we shouldn't just accept hypervigilance and sort of over-arousal behavior as normal. All right. We don't want to be saying, well, they're a Border Collie. What did you expect? Lots of people will sort of, joke about that and they'll be like, well, they're bonkers, but they're a Border Collie. Rubbish, absolute rubbish. I don't think we should accept that hypervigilance and over-arousal. What it tells me is that there's a need not being met. And if we can uncover that, we can really help our dogs enjoy their lives more, which in turn is likely to have a big impact on ours as well. So if you came to me and you said, oh, Gemma, my dog's always on the go, they really struggle to settle down, what would you say is the first step to help them learn how to relax? So the very first thing I would get you to do is diary keeping. All right. Work out the triggers that are bothering them and creating some of that hypervigilance. All right. And interfering with their ability to rest. Diary keeping is a really good way of working out what is happening so that you can then think about the details to change. And the other thing I would suggest is join one of my free training challenges, particularly the one that I have coming up next week. We are working on exactly that. We're going to be building plans for just these kinds of collie flavored problems. All right. And that's it for today. Thanks for joining me. I hope this episode gave you that extra boost to make a difference to your collie's behavior. Today's episode was sponsored by my brand new 5-day collie problem solving training challenge. The 5-day challenge is taking place from Monday, the 27th of January, 2025. And during this week, we'll be diving into common collie problems and coming up with training solutions that work for this unique and special breed. Don't forget, you can find information about this and all the resources mentioned in the Facebook group. So head over there now. Next episode, we're going to be talking about how to make sure our collie's physical health is in good shape. So stay tuned. So until next time, stay focused on progress, not perfection. And remember, every small win counts.